Divorced men of Reddit, what moment with your former wife made you think, yep, I'm asking this girl to divorce me? When she presented a picture of our 4-year-old daughter and me laying next to each other on the couch, watching Blue's Clues to our marriage counselor as evidence of my inappropriate conduct around our kids. Thank God he saw right through that bullcrap immediately and told her to knock it off. Edit. There's no Joe. Hashtag not my Steve. Edit 2. Minnie asked, so here's the deal. We've been divorced almost 5 years now. The process wasn't fair, and that wasn't really my ex's fault. No allegations of child abuse or misconduct were brought up against me during the proceedings, so that was good. They wouldn't have flown for a minute in court anyway. Our kids are older and every day are becoming better equipped to see and understand the difference between what's reasonable and right and what's simply just batcrap insane. And it's not working out all that well for their mother, who hasn't changed her MO much, if at all, since we parted ways. So it goes. I'm happily remarried now to a woman with kids of her own. Kids who were friends and schoolmates of my kids before she and I even got to know each other. They're all our kids now. Life is good. No more shenanigans. Story 2. 15 years in, and I find texts on her phone. Completely blindsided. No clue she had it in her to cheat. Told me it was just texting. Begged for forgiveness. I caved. A month later, checked the phone bill to find that it never stopped. Confronted her again. Cue more begging and more denial on my part that she would let the life we had built go down in flames. This went on for a few months. So many promises. One night, I caught her on the phone when she thought I had left. Suddenly, it's not just texts. Sometimes it was phone calls, too. Just a friend she could talk to that she let things go too far with. Promised to break all contact, swore it was never physical. Then I found emails. She detailed things that made me sick to read, but also included descriptions of his house. She broke, finally, but swore it was all just in the line of duty. That's how she met, you see. Visiting nurse service, and this guy was a client. Promised she was done. Loved me, you see. No chance she was going to let 15 years go like that. I wasn't buying it anymore, though. She announced she was going out one night with a work friend. Promised they were only going to the bar, then she'd be home. Maybe late, but not too late. She had taken over her own phone account by then, but wasn't bright enough to understand that Google Latitude was still showing me where she was, and I wasn't about to show my hand. She kissed me goodbye and beelined right for his house, and was there until the wee hours of the morning. Once I knew where she had headed, I called her dad and my best friend to keep me from doing anything dumb. I will love them both forever for keeping me calm while my world went effing insane all around me. My father-in-law offered to stay with the kids and wait for her to get home. Around 3 a.m., while couch surfing my buddy's place, she sent me a nasty text asking me where the F I thought I was. I texted her a screenshot of her little GPS dot at her boyfriend's and let her know that I'd be sending her some paperwork soon. Well, first of all, OP, sucks. Really sucks. I hate that happened to you. But in a situation like this, man, don't even give her a second chance. Once she's cheated, why would you want to even be with someone that's even entertaining the possibility of being with someone else? You know what I mean? So I realize that's easier said than done, and you've got kids, but man, oh man, when you caught her the first time, that's when you should have shut it down. Could have saved yourself months or years of additional anguish. Story 3. Preface. We were doing a trial separation. She moved into the spare bedroom of our apartment. Divorce had been thrown around, but we still spent time together and slept together. I wasn't seriously considering divorce, but rather counseling, etc. Up until the day I came home from work, at the same time I came home every day, and she was in her room being effed by some random guy she met on Tinder. She had not told him she was married. I kicked him out of the apartment and made it clear to her I would be moving out as soon as possible. Edit. Must add that she expressed interest in counseling as well, and that we discussed ground rules for the separation, one of which was do not F other people. Edit 2. Thanks for all the love. For those asking, I moved out because I couldn't afford the apartment on my own. I didn't kick the guy's ass, but I did tell him while punching the door that he had 3 minutes to get out of my apartment. I said if he wasn't out in 3 minutes, I was going to break down the door, and it wouldn't be able to shake hands. Proud of that line from enraged me. Usually, I'm not very articulate when angry. He was out in a little over 2 minutes. Story 4. We met and spent the first 7 years of our married life on the West Coast, then moved east. 5 years later, I took a job back on the West Coast, but it was in the middle of the school year, so I went out ahead and lived on my own until everyone could join me. Things hadn't been very good between us for a while, but I hadn't articulated it to her, or even myself, beyond vague feelings of dissatisfaction. One weekend, out there on my own, I decided to take a day and drive to one of my favorite towns. A town in which I had lived long before I knew her. A town we visited often while married. It was late afternoon. I was about to head back to my hotel when I realized that I could visit a particular beach that had special meaning to me from my earlier life there. I stopped at a convenience store, grabbed a grolsch like I used to drink on that beach, and drove out there. Hiked out to a specific spot I remembered, sat down, popped the beer, and looked out over the ocean. And it hit me that I hadn't done that in over 20 years. Whenever we'd visit the area, I'd suggest stopping at the beach, but she wasn't interested and would always veto the idea. I'm sure reading this seems like the tiniest thing, but it was the catalyst for me realizing just how completely dissatisfied I was with our relationship. I think from the time I sat down, I knew it was over within maybe 10 minutes, just sitting there, sipping my beer, looking at the ocean. Story 5. Not me, but one of my best friends got his permission to post. He got a pretty substantial year-end bonus from work. He decided to use most of it for his wife's Christmas gift and pay off her remaining student loans, about $14,700, and the remaining portion to buy a new computer chair for when he gamed, about $300. Christmas morning, he was nice enough to let me stay at his place when I traveled for work, as he lived 20 minutes from the airport. We all woke up and had breakfast. His family and her friends came over and we started exchanging gifts. Besides paying off her loans, he had gotten her a few Times items. She opened the card saying her loans were paid off and she just sat there for a minute. After the silence, and assuming she was kinda in shock, she said, "Did you seriously not get me anything else? I bought you that stupid keyboard," the wrong one by the way, "and you only got me a few things?" At that point, his brother-in-law and myself decided to go hang out in another room for a while they ended up getting into a huge fight. A day later, when he was dropping me off at the airport, he told me he was going to visit a lawyer and get a divorce. Yeah, if you pardon someone of almost $15,000, they have absolutely no room whatsoever to complain about what you did or did not do for them. That is so beyond generous, even for a loved one. Man, oh man, get away from this woman. Story 6. She had lost her job, again, after quitting a decent one because she didn't get along with her boss. Anyways, a few months go by and I'm doing everything. Cooking, laundry, dishes, yard work, etc. I'd asked the kids, what does mom do all day, and they said she plays on the computer all day. So the final straw came when I came home from work and had to wash dishes so I could make dinner. Dinner is made, so I tell family it's ready. She comes in to get a plate and serves herself first instead of her youngest child, who was 4 at the time and couldn't serve himself. As I watched this unfold, it dawned on me. If I'm going to do all the work, I might as well do it myself or find a partner to share the load with, because she clearly didn't want to be on my team. Edit. To those mentioning depression. Yes, she was, and maybe still is. She was on meds for it, and we went to counseling after the birth of one of our kids, and she had postpartum depression. At this time, she stepped out on our marriage with at least 3 guys. I finally got proof with hidden caller ID and a voice-activated tape recorder hidden under our bed. Yep, got to hear them having sex. Long story, but we stayed together. I don't know if the counseling helped or not. I also need to add that she was never good with money. Blew a small inheritance in record fashion. She would give me money for joint bills, and I was handing it back over so she could put gas in her car, or she had a bill of hers due. One year, we got a nice tax refund, and she promptly tells me she owes her stepdad $2,000. What the F? Still stayed. In short, my earlier response was to OP's question and the edit in some background, so you know that this was something that had been building for years. Story 7. Wasn't married, but about 1 month away from marrying. We worked together at the same job for about a year, but she was first shift and I was second. We both had weekends off, so we could and did things on the weekend. We'd got everything paid for and were set. One weekend, actually on my birthday, I went to get a haircut before we went out for the night. I weirdly noticed this one car in the parking lot of our apartments. Didn't think too much, as there was a crap ton of cars that would come and go. She had gone up to a casino with her mom the previous night and stayed overnight. That wasn't uncommon, as they were both huge gamblers. I got back and did some cleaning, and she walked in. She looked at me and threw her ring on the table and said, "We need to talk." I think I like Joe more now and decided I want to be with him. I don't need the ring and you can cancel the wedding. It all clicked that that car I saw was Joe's. She didn't go to the casino with her mom, but with Joe instead. Even more effed up is I called her mom to see how close they were to home, and she covered for her daughter. I then come to find out her friend Joe was an ex-lover who also broke up her last engagement. He was always trying to befriend me too and act like we were best friends. I have never felt less of a man, more ashamed and hurt than when this happened. I sacrificed a lot for her. I was there doing anything and everything for her and her family when her dad very slowly passed away, and she ends up treating me like a pet she could get rid of when she got bored. I still can't remember a few months of time after that happened. I was in a bad place. Edit. I just realized I never finished this up. It took a while to get my head straight. My best friend of over 20 years, to me, a brother and family, helped me out so much. He made sure I was going to be okay and took me out to blow off some steam. We had an awesome trip to some fun-ass spots with a few other people. I owe him so much for the help. My family really helped too. I ended up meeting my fiance now about 6 months after I had that crap happen. We've been together for over 5 years and we'll be celebrating our first daughter's birthday on June 29th. Amazing what's happened since then. My one advice is don't ever give up or think you're worthless. You're worth everything to somebody out there, no matter what. I can say I'm almost embarrassed by how I reacted back then, lol. Edit again. I never expected this to get this much attention. Thank you everybody for the kind words. And yes, my ex and I were together for about 4 years. I will say, after I met my new fiance now, about a month into dating, I got a new job and got to say good riddance to the last of my ex. One of the greatest things ever. The oddest thing was my best friend who stuck with me actually had his dad pass away my last week at work. My last day, I had told them I needed to leave at 3 p.m. to go help my best and his family with last-minute wake and funeral stuff. They told I can't leave and they won't let me. After how my ex got everybody there to somehow feel really bad for her about leaving me, and I got left with people telling me how bad they feel for her, I just dropped my crap on the ground and left. I remember the supervisor saying, "You're going to get in lots of trouble," and I looked at her dead in the eyes and go, "What, am I going to get fired?" and just started laughing on my way out. Story 8. I worked, she played. She woke me up in the middle of the night to grab the extra blanket off the bed. I expected to find her disgruntled on the couch alone the next morning. I found her in the guest bed with another woman, both naked. No forewarnings or clue-ins, just despondent betrayal. I woke her for answers and got a whole lot of mumbles. Decided to split for space. That weekend, we both ended up at the same bar on the same dance floor. I thought she'd followed me there to make amends. She brought the same girl and completely ignored me when I called out to her. When I walked up to her, she pretended I was a stranger. I told her I'm not going to play any games and didn't know what was going on. She said she didn't want to be married. I gave her the ring back and went to tell my friends goodbye that night. I didn't want to tell them why. I felt so embarrassed. She saw me talking to my friends and decided to make out in front of us with her new woman, directly on the dance floor 8 feet away from where I stood while everyone stared. Looking back now, I realize she probably was scared to come out. I can give her credit for that, but she was an awful person for the way she did it and for never having the courage to say to my face whatever she was feeling. I thought we were best friends. I thought we were going to be together forever. She asked me to marry her. Now I'm just grateful for not being with a liar and a coward. I've made a fresh start, sold everything, traded my entire wardrobe and style to feel like I'm in a new life. Sure, I've lost more money than I ever thought imaginable, and the dog. I just keep optimistic that I'll find someone who deserves my time. I don't focus on the past, and I have faith in God and the future. Whoever I marry next will be grateful for a man like me and loyal. But until then, I'm gonna enjoy the single life again and just play. Story 9. She started working at a job with people that were closer to her age, 25 to 30, instead of a job where her coworkers were in their late 40s/early 50s. She wanted to go out and hang out with them rather than come home and be with her family, myself and our at the time 2-year-old daughter, and a godforsaken cat that she just had to have. There were a lot of other little things that just added up over time, mainly her desire to drink and drive, without our daughter in the car, thankfully, and 4 days a week of not coming home until 2 or 3 in the morning and not telling a soul where she was or what she was doing. After a month of that, she said she wanted a divorce. I fought it with everything I had for 3 months. Decided to go to counseling, where the counselor asked her, "Ex-wife, in your mind, is this marriage already over?" After a literal 5-minute silence, I had the answer I needed. Separated a week later and divorced a year later. We're still civil for our daughter's sake, but I will say that after the initial shock of actually going through divorce, after both of us proclaiming to do whatever it takes and never getting a divorce, I'll say I'm much happier now. I was able to save up and buy a house for my daughter and I, which I never would have been able to do had I stayed married. Story 10. I always refused to raise my voice during arguments, which usually made her crazier and scream louder. After one such argument, during which our 3-year-old daughter was playing upstairs, she started coming down at the same time her mother was storming up the stairs like a child of comparable age. Our daughter was in the way, and her mother got in her face and screamed, "God, I effing hate you! Move!" Of course, my daughter came to me, hurt. That was the moment I decided it was over. Edit. This was 13 years ago. My daughters are now 16 and 12. Unfortunately, I found out the hard way that, particularly in that day and age, family courts were seriously skewed towards the favor of the mother in many cases, unless there was proof of serious neglect, drug abuse, or physical/SA. The girls, I believe, are fairly well adjusted and doing okay. Their mother changed in regards to her direct dealings with them, however, continued and still uses them as a way to hurt me whenever she sees an opportunity. I've taken her to court for custodial interference, which is punishable up to 30 days in jail and a $1,000 fine, and they slapped her on the wrist with not so much as an admonishment. It's effed, but I do the best to keep an eye on the situation and try to give them as much stability as possible when they're around me, so they have an idea of what normal is. Story 11. My ex was one hell of a disaster, yet I stood by her and tried to work with the hand that I had been dealt, so to speak, because she was my wife. I discovered she was cheating on me. I expelled her from my house. As the rage subsided, we started talking again. I convinced her to move back in, and we agreed, as she had suggested when I first confronted her, to go to therapy together. She promised to never contact the guy again. 5 months later, as I'm finally facing the fact that she lies to me constantly and about all kinds of things, besides the usual not putting up with her share of the effort, expecting me to foot the bill on everything, not sharing stuff she should be sharing with her husband, etc., I discover she's talking to the guy again. So she keeps cheating and I don't trust her word one bit. I'm done here. Now, we had a kid together, and this was in late November, so I chose to extend my misery for 7 more weeks, so I wouldn't ruin my son's Christmas. I counted the days till January 15th, when I kicked her out for good. Those weeks weren't that difficult, actually, because she had made me miserable for years, and this period at least had a clear ending date. Divorced now, and still bitter about all the wasted years with that undeserving female dog. Story 12. My wife at the time told me that she had called a local radio station, which often discusses hardships that military families go through, and sometimes gives away $1,000 to a family in need of help. She said that she informed the radio station of my deployment and how I didn't come back the same, and she told them about our daughter, 2 months premature and only 8 months old at the time, who had numerous health problems. My wife explained to me that the radio station hadn't given away the $1,000 in quite a few weeks, so they were going to give us $10,000 for her telling such a heartfelt story. She called me while I was at work to tell me what had happened, and I was really excited. Asked my SNCOIC to help me draw up a savings plan and figure out which debts should be paid off first, etc. Things were looking up. I get home that night, and rather than being greeted with an enthusiastic hug, she points to the loft and mouths, "Not now, I'm on the phone." So I go upstairs and wait for her to finish. While I was waiting, I could hear her saying things like, "Yeah, I can get those papers to you, and no problem, I can have that ready by tomorrow." Maybe they need identification and proof of my deployment or something? Whatever. Fast forward to later that night, and like usual, I'm having trouble sleeping. I decide to get on the computer and listen to the podcast from the radio show. After a few searches, I find it and start listening to it. This is where my blood starts to boil. She told the DJs that she was a single lady living on her own and that her sister married a Marine and they had a child named Marie, our daughter's middle name. She goes on to say that Marie is now in her custody after the Marine husband, me, sort of, was killed in Afghanistan, and the mother, her IRL single sister with no kids, Jackie, was killed in a car wreck, and Marie was now my wife's responsibility. Hundreds of people called in and offered to help, many of which own businesses and wanted to offer things like baby supplies or completely furnishing a nursery for her. Literally thousands of people had heard this bullcrap fabricated story including some of my coworkers. It was the radio station she was on the phone with, and they were asking her to provide death certificates and a birth certificate for Marie, which is why I was shooed away. Okay, I'm just going to put in a polite request for part 2, like, okay, what happened? Obviously, she doesn't have these documents, so did she end up getting the money? Obviously, you left her, because that's kind of the title of the stories that we're reading here, but man, I want a little bit more tea. Come on. Story 13. I'd found evidence of potential cheating. Despite this, I was still willing to work on things. I confronted her about her feelings towards me, not the cheating. When I point-blank asked her if she was interested in counseling or trying to work things out, she said no. That was the first time. It would have been better to have stuck with it. There was a tumultuous time after that where we flip-flopped and were trying to work things out. Sorta. She complicated things. I had broached the cheating with her, and we made rules during our maintenance period, one of which was that she was no longer to have contact with her friend she was cheating with. I ended up finding out that she was still Facebook friends with him. When I calmly explained why this would hurt me, she turned around and said that I was the bad guy. I started living with a friend at this point. During my drunken, half-sobbing tirade where I explained everything to him, I finally realized that I don't want to be with this woman anymore. She doesn't love, respect, or care for me at all, and I don't deserve those things. Moved out, moved on, and have since found a wonderful woman that I will marry in April, even though I figured I would never get married again. Edit. I got hurt. It sucked. It sucked really bad. I never expected to get a divorce. Took some time to work on myself and address the mistakes that I made in my marriage and past relationships. I ended up finding a person who 100% is in sync with me and communicates like a mature adult. She's super smart and helps me through my emotions as I help her through hers. I did a complete 180 on marriage. It wasn't a struggle. It feels right. I thought long and hard after I decided to get married. I wanted to make sure I was not making the same mistakes again. I believe I found my true partner, and each day gives me more reasons to believe that to be true. Story 14. We were together for 4 years, married for a pube hair over a year. When I was working 2 jobs, considering a third, and she sat at home, unemployed, again, for the 5th time in a 6-month period. They don't respect me, so she quit. This job isn't fulfilling, so she quit. Everybody gangs up on me, so she quit, etc., etc. Our young puppy was not taken care of. The house was a mess, and I just worked anywhere from 10 to 14 hours. But sure, dear, I'll walk the dog and do the dishes and get the laundry going. No problem. Watching TV or reading are difficult things to do all day. Then I call her one day from work, excited that I'm getting out early. She says she can't talk right now, in a hush-hush manner. And a man's voice in the background? You can't talk right now? Why not? You have no job and don't do a goddamn thing around the house. Female dog, what? Who's he? What the F's going on? So I'm working my chicken and balls off to pay our bills and provide for us while you F around? I don't think so. She decides to stay home with some family to take some time to figure out if we want to stay together. I was so blindsided by everything that was going on and said we should talk and resolve this together. Why take time in separation to decide? Well, because this way she can F everyone she sees between our house and her mother's house, of course. She comes home one day because she needs clothes and puts some old random clothes in a bag, but sneakily grabbed all of her lingerie. I didn't notice until I was putting away the laundry she didn't do and noticed it was all gone. That was the moment I left. I didn't give a F anymore. I'm done. It's not worth it. The lies, manipulation, selfishness, all of it. I'm done. I'm not going to be your little female dog anymore. No more free meal ticket for you, you idiot. Then, for her final power play, she did the classic, I want to unalive, I'm an alcoholic, bipolar sex addict, and went to a mental hospital. She was released in 3 days, diagnosed with nothing. Bye, female dog. As much as it absolutely kills me, I even let her keep the dog, because it would be a better life for him. She has a yard, and her family's dogs that he grew up with and played with. I had to move to my parents' basement, with no yard, and I work a new job on an off shift. Now I'm moving across the country with a better job, with a better, prettier woman, in a better town minus a complete psychopath. Even if nobody reads this, it was slightly therapeutic to type out. Story 15. So I am partly to blame. I'm not without fault in this. While I was deployed to Afghanistan, she had an affair. This is far too common a story on its own. At the time, I was still very religious. I sought to repair the marriage and make things work. I told her I never wanted to talk about it again, and that she was forgiven, yet on notice, so to speak. For the next 2 years, we were both pretty crappy. She never believed me when I told her she was forgiven, and she truly was. She was scared I would cheat on her to get revenge. This made her jealous and controlling. She didn't want me to have female friends, associate with other female soldiers in my unit, typical crazy female dog stuff. This was a big factor in the divorce, but not the tipping point. I did learn from it, though. I'm not a player, but I won't ever be with a jealous gal again. Again, I was not without blame. I had a lot of anger and problems when I came back. I'd get off work and go buy some 40s, sit in a parking lot and drink rather than go home and try to fix things with her. My anger often got the best of me. I'd never raise a hand against her, let alone my voice, but she would push me to a point where I knew I would, so I'd leave for a couple days to cool off. Maybe this wasn't the best course of action, but it kept me sane. I eventually got bored and volunteered for a tour of duty in South Korea. My first week out of the country, she effed another man. That was the point where I was done. I married far too young and could have been a better husband, but I take it as a learning experience, something that did make me a better man and a better husband for whatever girl comes into my life. Story 16. I started dating a high school friend when I was 23. 2 months after dating, she, who shall not be named, got laid off. 6 months later, she wasn't working and I was pressured into marrying her by her parents. Like a dumbass, I gave in. We got married and 2 years later, she still hadn't found work. Not because of the economy, but because she couldn't get off her lazy ass and look. At the time, she was 25, didn't have a job, and didn't have a license. Her excuse was, how will I get to work? A couple of times a week, she would go out with friends while I was busting my ass off working 3 jobs. She opened a credit card in both our names and would use it for shopping. I remember losing my crap one day because she spent over $300 on 4 bras at Victoria's Secret. You might be wondering, how in the hell? She was a natural 42 double D. Once you break the 38 double D mark, bras skyrocket in price. Big boobs are expensive, gentlemen. Every time I paid that crap off, she would go out and rack up the debt again. Finally, I decided I had enough. Nothing I could do would change her, and I was no longer emotionally attached to her. On the first of the month of June 2010, I paid off the credit card, called the credit company, and canceled the card. I then paid the rent in full. I told the management to take me off the lease, that we would be out by July 1st. I secured a place for myself and prepared for the crap storm that was headed my way. The following day, I got home and she was sitting down watching some crap show on TV. The laundry hadn't been done, the dishes were still dirty, and the place was a mess. This was a common occurrence that no matter how many times I begged her to clean while I was gone, never got done. I walked into the living room, shut off the TV, dropped my house key on the table and said, Voldemort, I'm effing done. Despite trying everything to motivate you and doing everything I can to make this work, it's just simply not going to happen. I paid the rent for the month and you have 30 days to find a place and move out. I'm leaving everything here for you. TVs, couch, bed, Wii, computer, etc. And I'm only taking my clothes from the closet. I'll be out tonight. I gathered my clothes and left. I felt relieved. So much stress gone, just like that. I didn't get but 3 miles before my phone was ringing off the hook with her mom yelling at me and delivering death threats. The next day, I had my attorney contact her and start the divorce process. It's been heaven ever since. So that's how I broke free from the Dark Lord's spell. And honestly, based off of the reaction that the mother gave you, I'd say the apple didn't fall too far from the tree. So, good for you. Way to get out. Story 17. Obligatory, not my former wife, but with my fiance. The moment, we went to the bank. We'd been together over 4 years, engaged for 1.5. If circumstances had gone our way a little more than they had, we would have been married. I know it. She really was my soulmate. We connected from the moment we met each other, and through thick and thin, the ups and the downs, we were always there for each other and understood each other. We'd been saving to buy a house together. That was the plan. Buy the house, get married, settle down, and have kids. She had a debt issue. I knew that when we first started dating, but she'd been working to pay it off, and she had, and here we were, ready to buy a house. This was our year. We went to a couple of open houses for fun to see what we could afford in our price range, to imagine ourselves living there together, snuggled up watching TV or laying in bed with a book or or breakfast in bed together or whatever. It didn't matter. Just her and myself in our own home together. We went to the bank together, mostly for my own financial purposes, but when my advisor asked if we wanted to get a mortgage pre-approval, just to see what the bank said we could do, why not? We weren't going to rush into anything right away. I said yes. She clutched my leg and said no. We left. Nerve, she said. It's a big step in our lives together. I knew that. The thought of going to those open houses terrified me before we did it. We were crossing that boundary between just talking about it and it's real. I let it be for a while. Not a big deal, but something didn't sit right. After dinner, I sat her down, asked her. Nerves, she reaffirmed. I still didn't buy it. I pushed her to tell me. I knew something was up, and she started to cry. If I tell you, you'll leave me. I told her I wouldn't. I couldn't. There was no money. The substantial amount of money she assured me she was saving up didn't exist. She had nothing, and not just nothing, but the money she claimed she had was actually in debt to the bank for. The amount she told me she was in debt for when we first started dating, that was a significantly reduced amount. I was in shock. I went into the shower and cried like a baby. Our plans, they never really existed. My fiancée, she consistently lied to me for over 4 years. I couldn't believe it. She threw away so much money to keep the lie going. She needed a new car. I told her she could afford a new one, so she went and bought a brand new one. She spent a ridiculous amount of money on me and my family for Christmas gifts. Pretty much gifts for any holiday she went big for. We even had an evening out celebration of her paying off her debt. Finally, it was supposed to mark a new beginning of our lives moving forward. It wasn't real. She even picked on my own family members who were irresponsible with their finances, with us never realizing that she was potentially even worse off. I didn't sleep on it. The next morning, I helped her pack her things and she left. I cried again, but 2 days later, I asked if she wanted to meet to work things out. She agreed. I thought I could look past it. We tried for a few more weeks, but I couldn't. I couldn't look at her the same way. I couldn't trust the words that came out of her mouth. I left for a second time. A month later, after lots of introspection and reflection, I saw her side of it. The embarrassment of revealing the debt in its true form in the first place. Then the realization that the hole was dug too deep and there's no way out. I sent her an email asking if she wanted to talk. Not to commit to anything, but to see if we could slowly rebuild what we had together. I still loved her with my whole heart, and I wanted to make this, us, work. She agreed, and we started talking. Then the second moment came. In the few short weeks we'd been apart, she'd joined Tinder, which wasn't a bad thing in and of itself, but then I found out she'd been on 4 separate dates, or so she says, 3 with one guy. She hated it, she claimed. She said she compared them to me, but they weren't the same. She did it to try to ease the pain, she said. It didn't make sense to me. Couldn't have figured that out from a single date. How did she make it to 4 before this realization kicked in? I dreamt at night of her, dressed up as beautiful as she always was, but with someone who wasn't me. At a fancy restaurant, the kiss afterwards, the ride home together. I couldn't do it. She swore she never had sex with anyone, but she also swore up and down that she never had anything to hide to begin with. I couldn't do it. I couldn't trust that she was telling me the truth, and I thought I knew when she was lying, but she did such a good job pulling the wool over my eyes that I had no idea what to look for, what the signs would be. I told her I couldn't do it, and I stopped talking to her. That was a week ago. I miss her terribly. I really do. I still love her, no less than a week ago, or a month ago, or a year ago. I wanted us to work out so badly, but that 1-2 combo of the lying, then jumping straight to dating other men so quickly, she never even reached out, never said hi, never asked how I was doing. She isn't the same woman to me who I thought she was, and that's what's tearing me apart inside, because in my heart I still have my baby girl from 2 months ago, when things were perfect and I was blissfully ignorant, and that's what I want so badly, but I know it shouldn't, can't be. The woman in my heart is gone, and I don't think she ever really existed in the first place. I don't know what hurts more, the fact that she lied, or the fact that she maybe didn't love me as much as she said she did, not enough to deter her from seeing other men. Story 18. I'd been married for 14 years. We split up the day before our anniversary. I was effing tired. When I had something happen to me, it wasn't a problem. When something happened to her, it was the worst. One example is a year-long cardiac issue on my end. Arrhythmia, stress tests, Holter monitors, specialist appointments, that sort of thing. On her end, one time she forgot to eat lunch and choked on some too hot food and hit her head when she passed out. Those were, in her mind, equivalent. There are other examples. When I lost my job and I told her I was having trouble mentally, she told me, quote, "Just try harder." And that was the sum total of emotional support I got in 14 years of marriage. By surprise one day, I found out I was seriously sensitive to a medication. I passed out for a couple days, did a lot of vomiting. My body kept throwing firmware errors when I tried to wake up. Not a username joke, it's the best way to describe it. And I was more than a little disappointed when I didn't wake up in the hospital. I lost 8 pounds in a couple days, and 5 of those pounds never really found their way back on. She was mad that I'd lost weight. She went on vacations every year with her teams and clubs. She thought of my work trips as equivalent to vacation, so I never got any time off. We only had short kid trips to the next city, and before that was our honeymoon. Conversations were a nightmare. If I phrased anything imperfectly, she'd hold it against me for years. I told her that sex was a way to feel an emotional bond or something like that, and she kept bringing it up that, that's how you feel love? So it was nearly impossible to say anything important about anything at all. I couldn't relax at home. I couldn't feel like I couldn't say things or do things without it being recorded, mentally, and thrown back at me. It was like being on camera all the time, and it felt like she was just trying to trap me with any given conversation. She still does this, trying to get me to agree to oddly specific phrases or bringing up old issues over email after they've been resolved, like the time I caught her stealing money from the children. In the last year, she just kept asking me weekly, daily if I was cheating. She'd been refusing any kind of sex, told me to stop asking, and when she initiated anything, I'd have to guess exactly what she wanted. No questioning from me, and any mistake ended up with her crying. It was dreadful, so I kicked my own ass to get into better shape. I went from pear to V and lost a bunch of weight and put on a bunch of muscle. I hired a trainer from the gym, and she had a party when I wrote it on the calendar in the kitchen. Who is Susan? Accusing me of flirting with the clerks in stores when I was there with my ex. I still remember her saying, in bed, that I'd gained a lot of muscle and I was sad that she'd noticed because she really shouldn't have taken so long that she should have noticed. In counseling, she said that she'd never asked me to do any of the fitness stuff, and my inside voice was screaming, "Yes, you did. Every time you said I wasn't sexy enough." I ended up losing a total of 90 pounds from the time we met to the time we split. So, yes, I looked at adult content. She was fine with it at the start. Then, somewhere along the line, she conflated adult content and cheating, and eventually even self-pleasuring and cheating. The damnable thing about this is that if anyone knew much about me, you'd know how much I dislike germs, so ew, no. I wouldn't put my lips or junk on a stranger's face and or tackle box. I tried to explain that. Look, if I don't eat leftover dessert from the kids' plates, what makes you think I'll be comfortable with cheating? I discovered later that there is a very high likelihood that she had cheated on me, and more than once. I suppose in retrospect, the conversation that started with how chlamydia can stay in the body for a long time should have been more of a red flag. We were each other's firsts, and at some point I developed HPV, but who knows where that came from. I suspect some of her major health issues stemmed from complications from an abortion after I'd been sterilized. In all honesty, whatever. I don't care about her anymore, other than I hope she's healthy because we share custody of our kids, and I don't want to go to her funeral until the kids are a lot older. She looks like hell though, easily up more than 300 pounds. I hope she gets better. So what was the final straw? When I realized that she wanted all the time in the world to fix any problem she was facing, and that I had to face all of mine alone and fix them overnight, or sooner if possible. In the morning after the last counseling session, she asked me if I thought it was okay to lie to people that you're in a relationship with. And of course, yes, there are lies that are acceptable. I went to the anniversary dinner alone. The waitress comped my meal. Sometime after the split, I was talking to someone online about his ex. He was beaten up on the regular with her flailing her forearms at him, making her physical abuse look like defensive wounds and like he'd grabbed her hard. He was only able to escape once cheap cameras were available and easily hidden. When he heard my story, he said, "Amen, brother," and it wasn't until then that I realized that my ex was an abusive cheater that kept gaslighting me. On the upside, when the divorce was finalized, the papers were ready a day early, so I went and got them and posed with the process server for a Facebook photo. It was a regular Thursday, but my American friends wondered in amazement how I got served on a holiday. We celebrate our national holiday a few days earlier up here, so I was given my divorce papers on Independence Day. And the irony is not lost on us that you were finally liberated from this toxic relationship on Independence Day. I see what you did there. Story 19. This was the best thing that ever happened to me. So, no crap, there I was. I was driving home from work, and a really weird text message and phone number that I didn't recognize pops up on the screen of my iPhone. The message said, testing 123. I began starting to type back, who is this? And another text message pops up that says, I'm getting the message. Then, this is my new number, so you have it now. So I stopped typing and didn't send it. Then, still a little puzzled because I don't recognize the phone numbers, a text conversation begins. So I just sit back and watch. The highlights of the conversation were, that was so hot. How do you think I should tell him? And he's so stupid, along with, I wish he was still out of town so I could be with you tonight. I had just returned from a week-long business trip the day before, and other insulting, incriminating banter. As the conversation progressed, needless to say, I figured out who at least one of the texting people was. I arrived home from work and confronted her. She, of course, appeared, faked, to be completely shocked that I would even question her purity and virtuousness, and denied and denied and then denied it some more. This, of course, began to exponentially disgust me. I mean, know when you're busted, for F's sake. I won't even leave out the part where I told her she's a dirty whore, a horrible, horrible human being who doesn't care about anyone but herself and a liar, etc. We had 2 kids, 2 and 5 at the time, so I was the most pissed about what she had just done to them. Nonetheless, she continued to deny it, so I started reading her text messages to her. So effing busted. Oh, but wait, it gets better. It seems that she had secretly bought a new phone that she could hide in order to be able to text her new squeeze without me discovering, and accidentally not deleted photos, emails, text messages, etc., which I'll get to in a moment. But she, of course, was going to need a playlist with some good sex music, so she, being technologically illiterate, plugged her new phone into our computer in order to download our music from iTunes, but didn't know what she was doing, and voila, I start receiving her text messages. This is the moment I was like, F this, we are so done, as I would never again, and to this day, don't trust her. Now, I could end this story here, but there's more that's just too good not to share. So, being the dumb twat she is, with the cat out of the bag, it's clear now that I know what's up and we're getting a divorce. She asked me to fix her new phone so that I won't get her text messages anymore. At first I say, F off, I'm not your IT guy anymore. She tries to fix it herself and fails. I'm still getting her text messages on my phone, although she thinks I'm not. I let this go for a few days, reading insults about myself and some other pretty painful crap. So I finally explained to her that I didn't want to get her text messages anymore because I didn't want to keep reading this stuff about myself, and agreed to fix it for her. So she gives me her phone. I told her I would also need her old phone to transfer everything onto her new phone for her. Remember, she's computer illiterate. Unbeknownst to her, I had downloaded some iPhone recovery software prior to this. False offer of assistance, born out of pain and defeat. So I recovered all of her text messages, photos, emails, several online dating profile screen names and passwords, etc. Even everything that had been previously deleted. Didn't tell her and gave her back the phone. When reviewing the data later, I learned she had been cheating for a couple of years. However, it was all with women. She was secretly a lesbian. Not bi, mind you, but straight up lesbian. And to be clear, I had no issue with that. I have issue with being lied to, cheated on, used, and played for a fool. Let's just say the deleted photos and text messages were super hot, lol. I also learned her true nature from this data. We were married for 10 years, together for 12, anniversary in July. You think you know someone after all that time. Year 9, October, we become foster parents to an amazing 8-month-old boy. However, we argue a lot. I get attached to him and we decide to pursue adopting him in January. We still argue a lot. Obviously, both of us aren't happy. Mid-July, I explained to her that I don't know if our marriage is strong enough to adopt him because we fight a lot, and I don't want to adopt a kid into a home that's broken and suggest we go to counseling before we adopt him. I'm told it's just a rough patch and that she's forever committed. No need for counseling. 10th anniversary rolls around in the end of July. Being a good husband, I bought her a big fat diamond anniversary ring. Adoption goes through in August, divorcing in September. Shake my damn head. The data grab revealed her years of cheating, her plan since the conception of adoption to go ahead with the adoption, but divorce me shortly after, thereby shoring up many years of future child support for 2 kids rather than 1. Her plan to wait until after the 10th anniversary in order to score maximum alimony and then move her girlfriend into our house so the 2 of them could forever sponge off me and live happily ever after. Her secret money stash and credit cards and, drumroll please, the drug problem was also hiding. Yes, I know now that I was an oblivious idiot, lol. Once the divorce was happening in October, her true colors began to show. She beat me to the punch on filing for the divorce and checked the box full custody for her, no visitation for me. I lost my mind. She gets a safe to keep her secrets, drugs, credit card bills, court papers, etc. However, I cracked her safe and didn't tell her because I wanted to see what else she put in there. She used my daughter's birthday as a combo, which I guessed on about the 10th try, lol. Yeah, that kinda dumb. She, for reasons I still don't understand, not knowing that I knew everything at this point, went nuts, telling me she was going to take my kids away and I'd never see them again. She was going to take the house and gloating that she and her new GF would live there and I'd be paying her for the rest of my life. Pure venom for no reason other than my discovering her secrets. This badgering all day, every day became more than I could bear. But I also knew that if I moved out, she gets the house and kids and the ball is in her court. So I stayed, but ultimately, one day after listening to her lies, knowing she was doing drugs, stealing mail from my lawyer, stealing checks made out to me, and being able to take no more, I told her that I had the data. She called me a liar, said I didn't know crap. I whipped out my phone, opened up one of her most scandalous deleted sex photos, showed it to her, and said, quote, "This one's my favorite." Seriously, one of the most satisfying moments of my life. I then explained to her that even with support and alimony, she can't afford the house we live in, which actually may not have been ultimately accurate, not knowing how much alimony and support could end up being, but I believed it at the time. Therefore, a judge would automatically award me the house. Also, because of that, my stable work history, her drug problem, and fiduciary shenanigans, that a judge would also award me the kids. I wouldn't have to pay her crap, and when I was done with her, she'd never see the kids again. All I'm going to say is, it was effing priceless, lol, and my lawyer was awesome. Long story short, she realized I was right and begged me not to take the kids from her. Although, why should I listen to her? She was fully prepared to completely F my life and her kids' life up, just like she was effing her own life up. This is long, lol. I'll just sum it up by saying I agreed to give her 50-50 custody after rehab and showing me she had her crap together. I didn't want my kids to not know their mother, even if she's crazy. They deserve to draw their own conclusions, and I know they will. However, she had to agree to give me almost everything. The house, truck, trailer, motorcycle, retirement, agree to minimal child support and no alimony, which she did. I did agree to split the savings with her if she gave me back the diamond anniversary ring. So take that, female dog. You just got beat at your own game, lol. Now I'm the happiest I've been in 10 years, enjoying my freedom, dating, and just generally having a blast. Best thing that's ever happened to me. Story 20. I was deployed to Iraq in 2009. I know. I haven't even read the comments on here, but I'm sure there are about 100 of these stories. And my wife went to live with her mom in Texas while I was gone so we could save money. About 2 months in, things got strange, and I see this guy all over her Facebook. I asked her about it, and she said I was just jealous, and it resulted in a fight. A little while after that, she sends me an email that she has a crush on one of her friends. Big fight occurs over the phone. I told her we need to go to counseling, but she can't hang around that guy anymore. She said no, because that was her only group of friends and blah blah. I effing conceded and dropped it. I knew I could do nothing while overseas, and the fighting was a severe distraction while I was over there. But I then had the bright idea to look at our cell phone bill, and what do you know? This same number is calling her at all hours of the night, almost every night. I call it and it's some dude, and I put the pieces of the puzzle together. I tuck that away in the back of my mind. I come home and things are okay, but she's acting shady with her phone and getting strange texts from a girl's name, saying babe and I love you. I remember about the cell phone call log and realize she's talking to this dude while I'm at work, still in the Marines. So after a few days of not looking forward to the convo, I confronted her. She initially lied, but eventually came clean. We separated right before Christmas and divorced that spring. One thing to note, I really chose to ignore the reality to get through the deployment. Once I got home, I just wanted someone to be there. That's why I didn't ask her more about the guy after a while. Story 22. I seem to have interpreted this question a bit differently than other posters. More of a I'm just asking for it now kind of moment, rather than a this is when I knew it was over thing. So I'll be straight up about it. My wife and I met while we were on drugs. We started our relationship as casual, but still heavy drug users. We developed into drug addicts. We got married, and a year later she quit. We sat down and we had a good long talk about getting clean and fixing our lives. I was genuinely on board with her at the time, but she actually did it. And I did not. I just took my drug use into hiding, until one day I didn't. I was sitting at the kitchen table smoking heroin while she was home. I would have just put it away and continued on, but I accepted that there was a good chance she'd walk out and see me. I cared, but I also didn't, and so she did walk out and she did see me. And that was my asking for her to divorce me moment. To her credit, she did, and as far as I know, she stayed clean. And I was just basically a piece of crap for bringing it into the house. No excuses. Granted, this was 5 years ago now. I'm clean and have been for 3. So first of all, it's great to hear that you're clean now, but secondly, I had no idea that you could smoke heroin. I thought that was something that had to be... Never mind. I'm not going to go there. There might be kids listening. Story 23. When she drove home at 4 a.m., wasted out of her mind, for the zillionth time and passed out mid-text message, I started reading and realized she'd been having an affair for the last couple of months. She was an alcoholic and had cheated on me in the past, but this was different. I realized that she couldn't be a mother to our son anymore with her issues, and she had started looking for a new meal ticket the second I was laid off from my job. My divorce went better than others. I got semi-F financially on our debt, but I have full custody and she's ordered to pay me child support, and she doesn't. Things got nasty when I asked her to move out, and she got physical with me. Again, but this time I called the cops. Holy crap, is discrimination against men real when it comes to these things? I thought I was going to be the one to go to jail. They asked me 100 times if I hit her. I didn't. They asked me what I did to provoke her. They refused to take pictures of my bleeding head injuries and implied I did it to myself. The lead cop was a lady cop too. She should have gotten a felony or a PFMA in front of a child, but of course, even though she was drunk and I was the one who actually took care of our son all the time, the cops asked me to find somewhere else to stay for the night, and they refused to arrest her. I feel like if I was drunk and beating the crap out of my wife in front of our kid, I would probably still be sitting in jail right now. But I guess you get a golden pass if you have 2 X chromosomes in our criminal and family court systems. Just read through this thread and you'll see I'm far better off than most men who are divorced, and as a loving father, it really pisses me off that people who advocate for men's rights or criticize feminism are decried as misogynistic sexists. If feminists really cared about actual equality, these issues would be their issues as much as they are men's issues. Story 24. When I caught her lying about going out to a dance club with her friends from work, it turns out she'd been dropped off by those friends at her manager's house, and they left town together for the weekend. I'd been working 16-hour days and was pretty wiped that week. She wanted to go dancing with her friends in Houston and stay over the weekend, which I was fine with. I had my suspicions because of the text that previously popped up in the middle of the night. Once, I reached to turn off her phone and saw a text that said something like, "I'm glad I kissed you." I dismissed it out of exhaustion. Well, our phones had the family locator enabled, so I checked her location that night she went to Houston. She said she'd be downtown. She was actually way out in West Houston at a hotel. I texted her and asked where she was. She responded by telling me she was in a loud club and couldn't talk. I called a few times and she finally picked up. I asked again where she was. She deflected the question, but when I told her what hotel she was in and asked her if she was effing her manager, she started laughing. That crap hurt. I hung up, drank a few shots of rum, and went to sleep. I started the divorce process the next Monday. Best decision ever. Met an awesome girl a few years later that builds theme park rides. We'd been married for about 18 months. Kid on the way. Story 25. Had an old school friend tell me of his divorce. They were together from university, then ended up living in Manchester. They seemed like a very fun couple, loving and enjoying life. They ended up having 2 kids, and that's when the mother went crazy. She started insisting her boy of 2 years wanted to be a girl, started changing his pronouns, dress sense, toys, and everything about this boy's life was about a girl. At this point, my friend, the dad, didn't really mind. He thought this was a phase and his wife would change. The boy hit school age 4 in the UK and went to school. He started to enjoy boy toys, play with boys, roughhousing with other boys, and wanting to be a boy. The boy told his mom, and his mom insisted he was a girl. Arguments ensued, and the mom doubled down, brought around experts who agreed with her the boy wanted to be a girl. So the mother said this settled the issue, got the boy's ears pierced, started overtime with the conversion of the young boy to a girl. This continued until he went to secondary school, and as soon as his hormones kicked in, the boy realized he was a boy, wanted to be a boy, and he started really hating his mom for what she put him through. All his family photos were of him as a girl. His clothes, toys, room, even the school kids coming up to secondary school with him saw him as a boy who's forced to live as a girl. When the boy was around 13 to 14, he went on a D&E trip, learning camping and wilderness stuff. The boy wandered off in the middle of the night and no one noticed. In the morning, the teachers and adults went searching and they couldn't find him. Then there was shouting from the kids. They found his body leaned up against a tree, slits going from hand to elbow crease, and note in his hand saying, "I always wanted to be a boy, but she wouldn't let me." Upon hearing the news, the dad was distraught, trying to contain his family and keep it going. The wife started attacking the school for not supporting him as a girl, the dad for not promoting and encouraging him to be a girl, and even the boy's sister for not supporting him. She started to get worse with each week, hitting the daughter and the husband, moving on to using objects, and eventually she tried to attack the husband with a serrated bread knife, shouting, "It's all your fault. I'm going to take everything from you. You'll end up with nothing." Husband, thinking it was a heated argument threat, ignored what she said. About a week later, the divorce papers came. During the hearing, the wife basically laid all blame down on the daughter and husband, made the husband out to be abusive, attacked her, tried to essay her, and tried to essay their son because he was a girl in her eyes, and so on. None of it being true. The verdict came in. The husband lost his house, rights to access of his last child, had to pay custody to the mother and expenses for the court case. The dad, upon hearing this, realized he lost his son, home, wife, daughter, and with no immediate family alive, had nowhere to live. After the hearing, he came to talk to me, told me everything, and we got pretty drunk. Watching grown men cry is hard on a person. I put him up until he could get his life in some kind of order. The next day, a dog walker found his body at a spot overlooking the countryside. He unalived himself on a tree. The mother is alive and so is the daughter. No idea where they are, but I did see them moving out of the house. At my friend's funeral, there was me, some more of his friends, and that's it. No ex-wife or daughter. First time I've shared this story, and it's hard to repeat it. Story 26. So, before I write this, I would just like to say I'm a 27-year-old female, and I'm telling the story of my father, and when he knew it was time to divorce my biological mom, aka the uterus, as I commonly refer to her. My father passed when I was 17, so this is his posthumous tale. My biological mother was extremely abusive, both physically and mentally. Hell, spiritually even. She cheated on my father shamelessly. As a child, I remember her throwing things at his head and leaving for days and coming back home when my father had his paycheck. I remember watching my father cry in the kitchen sometimes when he thought I wasn't looking. He tried to stay in the marriage for the sake of me not being part of a broken family. He tried his best to make my childhood as normal as he could. I also had a half-sister whom shared the same mom but different dad. My mother was so tasteless, and she would often take my sister with her and have sex right in front of her. Needless to say, my half-sister grew up with the preconceived notion that sex equals love. She was pregnant at 15 and married at 17. Anyways, not to digress, the breaking point for my dad was when my mom dropped me off one night at 1 a.m. on a school night and went back out to a family party. My father was getting me ready for bed, and I asked him, "Why did mommy have her tongue in someone's mouth?" Threshold had been reached. What I distinctly remember was how my dad handled such abuse with such dignity. I woke up to his things gone and my mother back home cursing and threatening to make his life hell and waging war on him. She told me I'd never see him again. I went into hysterics. My father came back and bought me a present and apologized and tried to explain to me he'd seen me on the weekends. I wasn't having it. I would cry nonstop. My mother couldn't take it and told my father to pick me up. She remarried a few months later and tried to go for full custody, but my father fought tooth and nail. He won after having a psychologist deem her mentally unstable and unsafe. I guess the only reason I wanted to write this was I'm reading these stories and I see my childhood, and as an adult I have an intense sense of gratitude for my father, for going through what he did and raising me the way he did with what he had. I sincerely also wanted to say thanks to the men who have children or who do not have going through such torment and malice the way you guys have. You never know who else is impacted, and I can say in the truest sense my dad is a hero for going through what he did and also showing me what unconditional love is, and I wake up every day appreciative for it. I also thank the uterus too for showing me the woman I do not want to ever be, and sex does not equal love. She passed away a year ago. Died alone on her deathbed. Story 27. It wasn't the silent treatments or the emotional outbursts over slights no one else could understand. It wasn't the years of manipulation and unhinged punishments. It wasn't letting myself be isolated by her from my friends and family. It wasn't even the violence. It was my son. I was afraid to file for a long time as I was afraid custody of my son would/could go to his crazy mom that was unable to love or care for him. It wasn't until a particularly violent night from her where I walked away 3 times and never even defended myself, and she threatened to and called/lied to police to have me arrested. I was bleeding and red all over, not seriously injured, and I wouldn't have called the cops, but to be hauled off and abused by the legal system for being the victim of the crime you're punished as the perpetrator of until later acquitted sucks. As soon as she threatened how she could have had me arrested after I let her be violent to no resistance in 2 engagements that night, one while she held my 2-year-old son, as soon as the threat was made, I locked myself in the office and started researching divorce lawyers. When the cops arrived and she made good on her threat, they spent half a minute talking to the bleeding guy, 30 minutes talking to the perpetrator, and I was gone from my home, work, and son until acquitted. As soon as I was in handcuffs, I knew there was nothing on earth that could keep me from filing for divorce and fighting for custody of my son. That any risk would be better than being raised in the home and marriage he was. Story 28. Made throwaway after reading, quote, because you robbed me of solitude but provide me with no companionship, because I realized how spot on that was. My story was similar. Classic narcissism, full-on addiction to drama. At first, some of the things she threw fits about were reasonable. They were difficult situations, and I thought, I get why she's upset. But then the drama continued, and it became clear that what she got off on was the drama. Her fights would just get more and more emotionally abusive, and the things she said to me just crueler and meaner, because getting a rise out of me fed her need for drama. If this sounds like your situation, bone up on the concept of narcissistic fuel. Anyway, the moment that woke me up was when she went on a walk with me. Walking together had been regarded as sacrosanct shared activity, and she screamed demeaning things at me for basically an entire hour, with no regard for the entire neighborhood hearing all about how ineffective my chicken was, and how insecure I was about having been fired and having work challenges. I know it's incredible, but that tirade of verbal abuse was not what woke me up. It was what she said to me at the end of the whole things, when we were in let's make up now time. That's when you say, I'm sorry. Instead, she said, I'm sorry that was necessary. Then I realized that she was not blowing off steam or venting. This was her plan on how to manage the relationship with me. It took about 2 minutes of that rolling around in my head to realize, F this, I'm out. Executed split a few months after that. Happily divorced since then. Story 29. We had a 6-month trial separation. Grand advice she got from her twice-divorced, unhappily married idiot of a colleague. I had signed a 6-month lease, but kindly had it extended for 2 months. In December, I was a wreck and waited for her call daily to move back in together. She called and said, maybe, let me see how it works out with dude she's seeing first. Still, thinking I should be patient with my wife, I accept and say I really must know by February 17th because I'll need a new place to stay. She said, no problem, we can talk then. My life, future, hopes, and dreams hang in the balance. I wait for her call, it doesn't come. February 20th, I call and ask why she hasn't called, and she says, I said that? I don't even remember that. Well, I'm still not sure what's up with dude, so I'm not sure. She was the most important thing in the world to me. I stuck with her through a lot of bullcrap. I shouldn't have, but oh well. And I wasn't even on her radar. I moved into a sweet bachelor pad on the beach. A few days later, I woke up and remembered looking myself in the mirror and saying, "You don't need her. You'll be just fine." It was like the weight of the world was lifted off my chest. I could breathe and think clearly. It was over. A few more tears were shed, mostly over what would be on my part. On her part, eventually there was regret and even begging for forgiveness and another shot. It cannot be unbroken, and she had broken it thoroughly. That was almost 3 years ago. I've fallen madly in love, gotten remarried, have a beautiful daughter, and consider myself the luckiest guy I know. I'm so glad she did what she did. It got me here. Story 30. Different story here. After 8 years of marriage, I moved cross-country for a new job, after we had decided that the family would move. But she later changed her mind, and I went anyway, thinking she was just having cold feet. She FedExed me a Dear John letter and divorce papers 5 weeks later, signed on Valentine's Day, and delivered on my birthday. After a few months of arguments and discussion, I quit my job, moved back close to home, found another job paying half of what I was making, and found out she had a new boyfriend, and I had a short-lived rebound girlfriend myself. I chased her for 18 months, prolonging our divorce proceedings, thinking she would come to her senses, trying to convince her she still loved me. I could see it in her eyes on the rare occasion she would actually look directly at me. It was a bitter and ugly separation, though, financially and emotionally. On our final court date, neither she nor her attorney showed up. I said F it and went through with the divorce anyway, even though I could have continued it again. 3 years later, at our son's baseball game, we sat next to each other and talked for the first time in years. Turns out she was over her boyfriend, who happened to be a close family friend whose wife had died suddenly a few years before, and our kids were the same age. But he was a pretentious prick, and everyone knew it. I moved back home 2 months later. We would walk into restaurants, and the servers would actually say to her in front of me, "I'm so glad you're not with that a-hole anymore." She later told me that she didn't go to court that day because if she looked me in the eyes, and I would both know she still loved me, and she wouldn't be able to go through with it. We've been back together and unmarried for 5 years now. I hope my backwards perspective can help someone in a similar situation. So, obviously tread cautiously getting back together. At least you didn't remarry, so you do have a quicker out this time if things go south again. But, glad to hear that you reconciled. Story 31. I know I'm late to the party, but I'll drop mine here for craps and giggles. Also, not truly a divorce. I was engaged, but broke it off near last minute because of her. We had dated for like 4 years. In our 5th year, I asked her to marry me. I knew she had her crazy moments, but I figured, F it, we're all broken in some way. I'll just love her through her crazy. Fast forward about 2 months after I asked her to marry me, and I was at the office, and she texted me. I didn't reply to her because I was on a secure floor, meaning employees aren't supposed to have cell phones in the room because of sensitive data. She knows about this policy, mind you, and she knows we had lockers we're supposed to keep ourselves in. Anyways, I got to work that day and forgot to store my phone. When I felt my phone vibrate, I took a quick peek. I figured I would text her after work and put my phone on silent so I didn't get crap canned for breaking a term on site policy. At the end of the day, I pulled out my phone to text her I was getting off and I would call her soon. But I had like 10 messages from her. I started reading the hate mail she had texted me and I was blown away. It covered the gambit, ranging from "you're an a-hole, why are you ignoring me?" to the extreme of "I hope you die and go to hell, you piece of crap," all the way up to the last message that said, "You're a nice guy and all, but I think we're done." I turned my phone off and thought about what I just read, how I had tried to treat her like royalty whenever I possibly could, and the fact that I'd never spoken ill of her face to face or behind her back. After a bit of driving home, she called and I answered. She didn't call to apologize, but to see if I would answer, and then wanted to play the whole thing off like she was just mad because I wasn't talking to her. It all just hit me. If I married her, I would spend however many years of my life trying to please her, only to have some random day set her off the deep end and I'd be sleeping on the couch or divorced. Halfway through one of her sentences, I just said, "Sally, you're right, we're through," and I hung up on her. I didn't take any of her calls after that, and I ended up changing my number later that day because she kept calling me. Story 32. I've never been married, but I want to give a shout out of support to people who found themselves trapped in awful relationships with their ex spouses and look back and wonder how they could have let things get so bad. It's okay, it's not your fault. Human beings are complicated and difficult, and lots of people out there are just straight up toxic. I spent about a year in a relationship with a woman who was a nasty, mean, short tempered, manipulative, verbally abusive, arrogant bully. I remember not long before the end, she had so effectively demolished any trace of my self worth and self confidence that I remember thinking, well, I'm going to end up marrying this woman. She's the best I deserve and will ever get. I guess this will just be my life now. I broke up by essentially ghosting, because anytime I tried to talk about it, she ended up finding exactly where my weak points were and managed to manipulate me into staying, under the assumption that it was all my fault, of course. Eventually, I finally thought to myself, why would anyone who openly says I'm a profoundly effed up person who's incapable of making anyone happy, and then later pretends that she never said it and I'm making it up to start a fight, actually want me around? When that clicked, we were in the middle of another fight. I just left, drove away, went home, got drunk, and didn't answer any more calls or texts. End of. The scary part, and the reason I sympathize with people who have dealt or continue to deal with abusive relationships, is that all of this felt completely normal while it was happening. Story 33. We were living in a tiny one-bedroom apartment. It wasn't big at all, but we'd been poor for a while. We were doing better, but we were still there riding out the lease and saving a house down payment. Then we got sick. Bad. Horrible flu, both of us. For a week, maybe. It was the kind of sick where after a couple days, you're no longer aware of how long you've actually been sick. For the two of us in a tiny shoebox, this was a nightmare. We were getting on each other's nerves. For the first time, I think. There was a little bit of mild snapping at each other, which was not something we'd done before. Coming out of the fog of sickness, though, we'd run out of edible or easily cookable food, and we'd lived in the middle of nowhere when food delivery services didn't exist. I'd just barely regained enough strength to, in my probably incorrect opinion, safely drive to the store, hobble around using the shopping cart for support, and get some basic supplies. Hopefully some pre-made stuff so we can eat kind of healthy as we regain strength. So I volunteered. I told her, look, I think I can do this without passing out. I just need you to throw out some of the bad food from the tiny fridge, so I can put it all there when I get back. So I went, and it was worse than I thought. I hallucinated for a while in the frozen goods aisle. But I made it home, and you'd be completely unsurprised to hear that she hadn't made space for the new food. She'd gone ahead and dialed up the prehistoric internet and was in a chat room or something. I didn't snap. I didn't argue. I just sighed, cleared out the fridge, put the new stuff away, and went to bed to pass out without eating. And as I drifted off, I just knew that we no longer had a future together. Edit. See my reply lower down. This wasn't, why did you divorce her? This was just the moment that I knew, or the moment that I knew that I had already known. Story 34. When I graduated from college, I was lost. I had no idea what I was going to do with my future. I was struggling for money, working temp jobs I hated. The real world was laughing at me. After some creative Googling, I stumbled upon the opportunity to teach English in Japan. It was a crazy idea, but just crazy enough to work. I'd barely ever left the US, and maybe a nice culture shock to the system was what I needed. I spent one glorious year there. I wouldn't say I gained a lot of valuable work skills, but I did manage to learn a ton about myself and what I'm capable of. It was a definitive year for me, and I came back a person changed for the better. Fast forward 10 plus years, and I have a very successful career, a house, and a wife. On a work trip overseas, I was informed that I'd be needed at my company's Japan office for a week. I was ecstatic. I hadn't been back to Japan in so long. When I got back to the States, I told her about this great opportunity and that I couldn't wait for her to come with me so that I could show her the town where I worked and meet my friends with whom I still keep in contact. The town that, in a very large way, shaped me into the man she married. Her response? She sighed, slumped her shoulders, and said, "Can't you just go with your father?" I was devastated. She knew how much Japan meant to me, but couldn't be bothered. In that moment, and considering other previous disappointments too, I realized that the memories I'd want to have with my spouse, I'd never have with her. Story 35. I had just gotten out of the hospital after an 11-day stint involving the birth of our son and 3 seizures caused by a rare medical condition. He had been approved for a month's worth of paternity leave and used it all playing video games. If I asked him to stay with our son, he got angry. He lost his job soon after because he refused to go back to work after his paternity leave ended. But the final nail in the coffin came a few months later. We had gone to marriage counseling, we'd tried living apart, and from the very moment I went into labor until this point, he had insisted that our tax money never came in. My mother was supporting our child. I was recovering from major surgery. He hadn't bought a single package of diapers. I logged into the tax website to see our status on our taxes, only to see that we had received nearly $7,000 during the first few days of my hospital visit. He had bought a brand new guitar. Everything else is a mystery. I have no idea where the money went. When I confronted him, he lost it, said the money was his and never mine, and that it wasn't my business where it had gone. My mother watched our son that night. I packed my things and left, still saving up for a proper divorce. Neither me or my son have seen him in 3.5 years. My boy is my boy, and I won't divorce that waste of a man until I get to keep the only good thing he ever gave me. Story 36. Still going through the divorce right now, but I still remember the moment that triggered it. Things had been bad for a while, with me feeling like more of a support system for her than a person. I was working late on an install that was going south. It was a problem I couldn't fix, and I was being passed around by no fewer than 4 help desks, each blaming the other. While I'm doing this on my work phone, my Bluetooth keeps ringing in my ear from my wife calling. I silence it and keep going. This is a somewhat common occurrence when I'm making important work calls. After 2 or 3 of those calls on a short period of time, I send her a text asking her what's going on, afraid there's some emergency at home. Instead, her reply is a passive-aggressive comment on how she, quote, just wanted me to know she was thinking of me, which I've now come to realize means I need some attention right this minute, and I'm going to get mad at you if you don't provide it, no matter what you're doing. And that was it from her. No wondering how I was doing or how things were going since I was stuck out that late making money for her to spend. Just anger that I wouldn't drop everything I was doing to answer the call. I get as far as I can go, still don't have the job done, and I'm going to have to come back the next day to do the help desk mess all over again in the hopes someone can help me. I get home really late and she's gone, left the kids in their beds and went off to who knows where, and I don't even know if she's coming back. At this point, I realize I don't know if I want her to. This has happened far too many times. Her expecting me to be there whenever she needs, but refuses to ever be there when I need it. That is when the relationship died. She was back at some point before morning. I still don't know where she was or who she was with, but that was the point I decided I wasn't going to put any more effort into the relationship if she wasn't going to. Okay, so if she just left the kids in their beds and scooted out of there, that's abandonment. So, I mean, you right off the rip have grounds to, absolutely ruin her in court. I mean, I don't know how you would be able to prove it, but surely there's a way. I don't know. I'm just rambling. Forget I said anything. Next story. Story 37. My ex-wife of 7 years cheated on me. I want to speak in her defense. We loved each other when we got married and when our son was born. I loved her as well as I knew how, but that wasn't very well, I'll admit. I didn't do anything wrong, but I didn't do very much right either. We just weren't compatible. We got married too quickly. We got married mostly because she was pregnant. I don't blame her for wanting out of the marriage. I don't blame her for wanting to find someone else. I didn't deserve to be cheated on. No one ever does because divorce and leaving without cheating is always an option. She's not a bad person. I had no idea it was happening. I never suspected a thing. She's not a bad person. She just did a bad thing. I don't hate her for what she did. I understand that she did it for herself, not against me. I wasn't ever supposed to know. She planned on leaving me without telling me. I'll say that last part again. She didn't do it to hurt me. She did it to help herself. I wasn't involved in her relationship with him, and my relationship with her wasn't fulfilling either of us. I could choose to be hurt and point my finger at her and hate her for what she did, but I don't, because she didn't do it to me. She did it for herself. She was selfish, and she did a bad thing, but she's not a bad person. I'm glad we're divorced. I'm glad she's gone. We're both much happier now. Story 38. Was not married, but had been in a relationship for 4 years and planning to get married with a girl. It was not so much a snap moment as the idea slowly growing on me for 4 months. I was very young when we started dating, around 15. So, of course, as all kids do, I thought it was the relationship of a lifetime. Problem was, she was a possessive freak. How possessive, you ask? The kind that asks you call her on Skype when you're at a friend's house. The kind that would throw a fit if I told her I'd go see my friends, not to mention the frequent self-unaliving threat if something displeased her greatly. This kind of possessive. However, having never been any good with girls, this being my first, let's say, official girlfriend, I stayed with her for very long. It goes even deeper than that, though. She was from a very poor family with a drunkard father, so when I realized that, around 6 months in, I basically invested in pulling her out of her misery. Then, my mother got in on it and decided to help her and pay for a rent away from that crap family of hers and for an education. Now, imagine, teenage Billy, fake name, but that's me, caught in something like that? I grew some very strange, extremely solid bonds with her. The kind of bonds that look more like a fish trap than bonds, really. But nevertheless, I carried onwards. Why? Because teenager. It got to a point where I felt kind of trapped with her, not really in love anymore. Sometimes I would ponder leaving her, but then get it out of my head forcibly, saying, no, you love her. And if you leave, she's in deep troubles. She'll lose her sustenance. On her side, the grasp had grown tighter. She wanted all my passwords, all my phone codes. She had invaded me, so I started making sock accounts, lying to her saying I didn't have Twitter. I was living a life of lies to gain some freedom. She had met my mother, the sweetest person alive. She is my mother. So, of course, my mother began treating her like her own daughter pretty much, and as my ex-girlfriend had a clear lack of affection, they went along very well. I, on my side, grew attached to her small siblings, helping them out of this hellhole of a family they had, playing with the 6-year-old. Our families were now linked. Imagine the situation. Billy, that's still me. Billy is 18 years old. He's in love with a woman that he's helped out of misery. She, on her side, is kind, just a tad bit possessive, like nothing really. Just invaded Billy's whole life so much that he hides for freedom. Lies frequently to escape with friends or even just to watch a few videos on YouTube instead of talking to her constantly. Billy lives in fear of getting caught and leaving a comment somewhere on the internet, in fear that she'll find it and throw a fit of rage that will, of course, lead her to threats of self-unaliving. Billy also loves her brother like his own brother, and Billy's mom considers the girlfriend like her own daughter. How effed is Billy's life right now? Here comes the end of the year. Billy leaves high school for an IT school. The IT school is super intensive, so Billy uses this excuse to catch a break from the girlfriend, even though he still struggles to see her at night on Skype for 1 hour or two, for she insists on it. 3.5 years in, it's Christmas. Billy barely even has time to visit his family, taken by the amount of work he has. He now has huge bags under his eyes. His life hygiene is pathetic. He's taken on some huge weight. The freshman's 15 kg have been more like 35 for him. As per usual, he decided to lie his way into catching a break. For New Year, he tells his girlfriend he's very sick. He won't be able to speak. You guessed it, he's seeing a friend. Said friend has his birthday around the new year, so it's a party, my dudes. A geek party, mind you. More entertainment systems and beers than human limbs in the room, and above 50% sweat per volume of oxygen. So what's wrong with a good party, you ask? Well, Billy hadn't guessed who'd be there. An old friend that now lives far. A she-friend from high school. Oh yes, you know what stupid things Billy was going to do. The evening started great. Billy went to wake up the aforementioned friend who arrived early and was extremely tired from traveling a long way to this party. He sat on the bed, leaned over the sleeping body, and said, "Do you have time for a friend?" while lightly tapping on her shoulder. The lady barely moved her sleepless eyes and answers, "Just a little longer." To which the nerd that Billy is answered, "And what about very old friends?" Yes, Billy is a huge Lord of the Rings nerd. To these words, the two arms of the sleeping lady clenched around him tight to the resounding cries of, "Billy!" The evening was off to a good start. And so a few hours later, the party started. Beers went down and League of Legends 5v5 rank games were played in troll meta. Good times. Later that night, everybody went to sleep in designated rooms, around 3 a.m. Billy and Nova, let's call her that, being girls and guys, were of course separated. The house was huge, and we were specifically told not to make a mess or to do amoral things. So, of course, you guessed it, Billy, who had spent the entire evening stroking Nova's feet with his own, sneaked up to her room, went in the bed, and, well, you can guess what happened when the Kurigumi-clad woman pulled him against her chest. Bare-breasted herself to, I quote, translated, get more warmth. Intense, thrilling, semi-drunk, emotionally satisfying, sweaty, barely adult sex. A wonderful moment, as I recall it, despite the utter amorality of the act. So, Billy had tasted the forbidden fruit. He had cheated. He's recovered part of his liberty by being a horny a-hole. What's the next logical step, you ask? 4 years in. Proposal. Yes, proposal to get married. To the girl he cheated on. Great effing idea, Billy. More like this, please. So, yeah, proposal and all. Very long story short, Billy understood 4 months later that this was a poor attempt at making a broken relationship work. He came clean, told everything, and left despite the girlfriend's cries asking him to stay. The photo of blood and whatnot. Billy, though an a-hole, had finally become strong, and finally stopped being such a goddamn coward. He helped his now ex and kept an eye on her for a time to be sure she was able to move on and wouldn't pull off some real self-harm. Now Billy's got a new girlfriend, all new, that he met in college. She's an absolute diamond and not a control freak. They share interests and she knows all about Billy's past, but Billy still gets to have his privacy. Billy has grown even though he was an a-hole. He got his chicken under control now, and he's damn happy because the one he's with is totally worth it. And finally, Billy knows what simple happiness means. He and his family haven't stopped helping his ex though. Damn, what a ride. Story 39. Not a divorce, but the moment when I decided that I didn't want a relationship with my high school sweetheart anymore. We were together for 7 years, and after 1 year apart, we started going out again. She told me everything you want to hear coming out of the mouth of your loved one. She even said she wanted to start a family with me, and I was over the clouds about it. But before we did anything, we needed to be done with her last school year abroad. No problem, right? I would wait, and we'd have a life together. Just before she left, she asked me to please take care of her house since her parents were going to visit her. I did. Spent the first week watering plants and getting out, but one day I got thirsty and went to her kitchen for a glass of water. You know what I found? A couple of mugs with a heart, her name and a man's name, not mine, of course. My heart just stopped right there. Automatically, I climbed the stairs to her bedroom and found a picture of her in a wedding dress, a man whom I hadn't ever seen before at her side, and her parents smiling happily whilst fabulous Las Vegas looked at me from the background. The effer got married. Even if it was a fake Vegas wedding, she forgot to mention this detail to me. As if on cue, she texted me, and in my rage, I just told her to never contact me again, blocked her number, and left her house. Keys were dropped on her mailbox. I've never told anyone this. It feels good to let it out. Story 41. This turned out much longer than I had planned, and in comparison to others, this sure doesn't seem that bad, but I figured it might be therapeutic for me to share. Separation started after she walked downstairs with her bags packed while I was doing laundry and ironing, after a morning of cleaning the house while she slept. The night before had been a Halloween party and all seemed well, but apparently not. Fast forward a few months and it comes out that she wanted to relive her younger years that I stole from her. I had done nothing but support everything she had ever tried. 7 jobs while we were together, or wanted, MBA program, and in return I got left alone. I had given things up to try and fix our relationship, but she just took on more to not have to be around. I eventually found out from a mutual friend that she had slept with one of my best friends while she was a flight attendant based out of a location 3.5 hours away, then ignoring me whenever she was home. I confronted her about it and said I was able to move past it if she would work on things, including therapy, not just doing what she wants, doing things together, trying to make things more equitable. She moved back in, and after a couple weeks, she declined to attend an engagement party for some very good friends so she could finish unpacking. When I got home, she still wasn't unpacked. She was sitting on the couch texting someone. Finally, the last straw. After she went to bed, I did what I shouldn't have and looked at her phone. Texts were from some guy talking about the date they had and discussing getting together in the future. Goodbye. Turned out to be the best decision I could have made. Happily remarried with a beautiful 3-year-old. Story 42. I realize I'm pretty late to this, but I decided to make an account to share this. High school sweetheart and I were going to college on opposite sides of the US. Cool. Love beats all odds that the long-distance relationship would flop, right? Things go fairly well until our 3rd year when I get a Skype call 2 minutes after she went back after winter break. She's pregnant. She's terrified. I do the only thing I can think of and fly out immediately and ask her to marry me. She says yes. Things start to get normal again. I leave school to search for a job in her college city, so at least one of us can finish our degree while the other supports the soon-to-be family. 1 month later, I meet good friend Jim. Seems nice. They've been friends since day one, and it's kind of curious that I never met him till now. Turns out they've been effing. Cool. I ask if the baby's mine, and she doesn't know. Jim seems well off, better looking, better whatever else you can think of, so I decide to leave and move in with my parents to figure things out. 1 month later, she moves home and tells me that she loves me and she was sorry about, quote, the whole Jim thing. Turns out, Jim was abusive. I decide that I don't care if it's my kid. I loved her enough to want to make it work. 1 month later, summer hits and she hates being pregnant and would rather have fun and go on adventures, and that she's, quote, too young to be making such a big decision. She gets an abortion. Jim takes her to France. I still haven't heard from her in 2 years. I couldn't begin to describe how devastated I was. I effed up my life for someone who'd used me. Cool, I mean, I get that I'm worthless, but damn, that cut deep. To be fair, we weren't married, but I felt we were. Stupid mistake. For me, the moment I knew I couldn't forgive her was when she came home after being gone for a few days. I thought she was at her parents' and packed for the trip. She told me about the abortion, and I cried over the son and daughter that had died while she calmly packed for a vacation and left without saying goodbye. Story 43. I haven't talked to anyone about this since it happened. I was married almost 4 years when that happened to me, this past November. Drunk wife finally got a job out of the house in July, in Crappy Town, Texas, and even found some friends. One she thought was great. He was funny and nice, and I'd love him. I want to explain that she has a very real friend that I will call Tina for now. And in the 3 months following July, the two had spent an extraordinary amount of time together, and texting. The wife had been working incredibly long hours, to include every single weekend for 10 hours a day. Not much for some, but this was a very big step from where she was. Anyway, I love this woman desperately, and even though she's still drunk by the time she makes it home from work, at least she's going. Here we are, late October, it's around 10 p.m. and the wife has been passed out since 6:30, and I'm looking for some stupid crap that I left in our car. I don't know what it was, just like a movie. Her iPad lit up as I was in the seat digging. I glance at it since it's sitting on the ground next to the bag I was digging through, and I see a list of messages from Tina, and one message from Tina last name. I probably wouldn't have thought anything about it had the last visible message on the lock screen from Tina been, "Good night, beautiful. I'll see you tomorrow." The next day was Saturday, and I know Tina doesn't work at my wife's work on Saturday, which is where my wife will be tomorrow, on Saturday. So I cracked open the iPad, and there they were, in all their glory. The very first messages that led to me discovering what I thought was never possible. Not to me, anyway. I couldn't help myself. An invasion of privacy or what have you. I don't care. I read through every message from Tina, and the similarly worded message from her super cool friend from work that I could find. Turns out, they're the same person, and it's not Tina. Months of lies and me catching her over and over and begging and yada yada yada, and my divorce will be final in the beginning of July. Story 44. Through all the abuse, the manipulation, the lying, cheating, and the theft, I never once considered it. Maybe I was too weak. Maybe I was broken down so much. I don't really know. I just never considered it at all. We tried a break where she alternated between cheating on me and stalking me. We tried counseling where she continuously lied and exaggerated to the therapist. We even tried the church, but it had no real effect. Still, I would have stayed. We had 2 kids and she loved me, right? But then I lost my job. Admittedly, the early days of our relationship were tough. I was young and I hadn't quite figured out my future yet, so I spent some time bouncing between jobs. Hard when you have a kid together, I know, but I had been at the same place for 3 years now. I had provided for my family for 3 years. We had thrived. I had been able to support her habits, the credit card she didn't know I knew about, the new car she just had to have, the expensive clothes and electronics, and the kids' toys we just didn't need, the girls' lunches where she would treat all her friends to lavish restaurants. But now I'm out of work because my company decided to close my plant. Nothing to do with me. We were all out of work. They only gave us a day's notice. I came home to an attack. Yelling, screaming, insults. I'm a horrible father. I'm a crappy husband. I never loved my kids. I don't take care of them. What good am I? It had never hurt this much before. Maybe I was being extra sensitive. Maybe it had just built for too long. Maybe I'm just an a-hole. I don't know. But when she started hitting me, I lost control. I started to yell, to fight back. I raged at her for what could have been minutes, hoping to stop me, to scare me into submission. She hit me. I hit her back. All the frustrations, all the hurt, the years of suppressing everything came out in that slap. It couldn't have been too hard. There was no bruise, but she'd suddenly stopped, and I suddenly realized that if someone could push me that far, someone could drive me to violence, there was no saving the relationship. I had to leave. I went upstairs, packed a bag, and did just that. A year and 2 days later, we were divorced. Story 45. Well, about 6 years after we were married, I noticed a lot of texts from a clearly made-up name on her phone. Every time I asked who it was, I was told, oh, a friend from work. She accidentally left her email open one day, and I saw an email pop up from an ex-BF. So I did the proper thing and read it. They were making plans to meet up. I then searched all her sent messages, and there were hundreds of emails setting up rendezvous. I confronted her, and she finally admitted that she had slept with him once, after we had been married about a year, but that was it. I guess she was convincing enough at the time. Either that or I just talked myself into making it work due to our daughter. Fast forward about 2 years and we find out she's pregnant. I'm ecstatic and she is devastated. I didn't realize until later that it was because she thought it was his kid. Before we went to the hospital, I had decided that if it came out biracial, I would get up and walk out of the delivery room and leave her to it. Yes, the other guy was black. No, I'm not racist. Luckily, that did not happen and I ended up with a wonderful son. However, 3 years later, through many different ways including phone tracking, GPS locating, and emails, I realized she was not only still meeting up with him, but several other men as well. I should have had a better clue when her nether region started to smell off. It all worked out. We split everything 50-50. I have the kids 5 days a week, and she will be moving out of state soon and leaving the kids with me. I have a fantastic new lady that's excellent to me and my kiddos. Story 46. The actual moment? After we had been in marriage counseling for 6 months, and during one session I expressed my need for sex and physical intimacy, and was told that she had no intention of making that happen. Background. She claims to be very religious and wanted to wait until marriage. We did have sex before marriage, but very infrequently. I thought once we got married, the taboo of premarital sex would be gone and we would have sex more frequently. In premarital counseling, sex was the number one thing on my list of things I needed from a partner. Well, we got married and only had sex once every 6 to 8 weeks. Finally, she said she wasn't happy and moved out. Started sexting and hanging out with a coworker and then lying about it. During the 6 months in marital counseling, she thought nothing was her fault and all of our sessions were focused on what I needed to improve on since I was the only one willing to try and fix things. Finally, after 6 months, I realized that I had done about all I could without some reciprocal help from her, and I finally expressed what I needed from her to be happy in the marriage, and she wasn't willing to do that. Biggest thing for me was probably going to individual counseling sessions in addition to marriage counseling sessions. It helped me realize that I was really unhappy with my then wife in marriage and that I was actually really hurt by her lack of effort and commitment. Story 47. Actually, she's the one who asked for a divorce, but there was a moment I realized it was all over. And no, it wasn't the moment she asked for a divorce. F it, it's a long story, but I'll tell for someone who may get something from it. We dated for 5 years without me ever really growing as a human being. I asked her to marry me, thinking it was the next logical step in our relationship. For a year, I was a pretty terrible husband, basically treating our marriage the same way I treated our dating relationship, except that we lived together. Everything started crumbling after our first anniversary. I had been teaching for 5 years and saving money in anticipation of pursuing a pipe dream career. I had pretty much a year's salary put away to supplement her income for the year, and she said she was okay with the idea of me taking a year off from teaching. But soon after, it became apparent that me not having a job really bothered her, so I took up a part-time job. Still, I noticed her pulling away emotionally and physically, and we started going to counseling in February. By May, she asked for a divorce, although I was pretty hard in denial and convinced her to continue with counseling. I applied for another teaching job the following fall to show her that I was going to provide again. Mid-May, she announced she'd be moving out. Trying to be a good husband, I told her to take some time by herself to think things through, and I would support her during the time away. But I told her she had to make up her mind by the time school started in the fall because I couldn't start a new job in a new place with something like this hanging over my head. Fast forward past the worst summer of my life. School starts in the fall, and she says she wants back into our marriage. I'm thrilled. I think I'm going to have my life back. My wife and I are going to rebuild our marriage. But every time I ask her to start moving back into our house, she wants to do anything else. Go to the movies, go to the mall, paint pottery, not joking. And that was the moment I realized this girl has no intention of moving back in with me and trying to rebuild our life. But still, I told her, no, I don't want to do insert activity. I want you to move back in so we can start picking up the pieces. And then she admitted that she didn't want to move back in. And that was that. Story 48. We had always fought a lot. We were going to get divorced after she lied about cheating on me before, but I got orders and wanted to try again with a fresh slate. Maybe a year went by and the fighting started again. I found out she was talking to one of my friends in the, hey, you should suck my chicken when you come back home kind of ways. We were overseas, so no small feat going home last minute. I was deployed and we hadn't really talked in a few days. She gets a hold of me and tells me her mom is sick and she has to get home. She grabs a plane ticket and flies over. No big deal. I had another buddy email me and he told me what was up. He was there hanging out with both of them, so I get to a phone and call her mom, and she's obviously not sick at all. So I call her and ask her to tell me what's going on. She lies and tells me she's at the hospital with her mom, so I told her I knew she wasn't and that I called her mom. She hangs up the phone and we don't talk anymore until she gets back like a week later. Overall, I basically paid around $1,600 for her to go get laid. And then she spent another $3,000 on, as she puts it, clothes and crap. I went to work, filed the paperwork to send her ass back to the States and revoke her visa, and that was that. Terrible experience. Honestly, I didn't care about the sleeping around. I assume in most relationships that it's going to happen, so I give my consent that it's no big deal. So long as our relationship wasn't affected and I wasn't absolutely lied to, it was all right. I can't deal with untrustworthy people being so closely involved in my life. Story 49. Found out she was locking our 1-year-old son up in his room with no food or water for more than 24 hours at a time. She wouldn't even check on him. While pregnant with our second son, she ended up locked in a mental health care after our home was broken into. She kept saying that the people that came into the home beat and SA'd her. Instead of an actual police investigation, the hospital blamed me for the beating and the SAing. Due to the mess that created, CPS got her to sign our son away to adoption while she was in the hospital. Couldn't even find an attorney to touch that case. I managed to get in the hospital for the birth, and was told that if I tried to leave the hospital with my son, I would be arrested for child endangerment and other charges. There was a lot I didn't know at the time. They also kept a police presence until my son was out of the hospital. Had to keep my 1-year-old out of state with family at the time. When she finally got out of the hospital, I decided to give her a second chance. A couple months later, it's time to get my 1-year-old back into my house. First week, she attacks my mother, then screams at our son that she isn't his mother, that she only let him be there because he's my son. Next day, I catch her pushing down on his chest to change his diaper. After that, she kicks in the front door because she thinks that we locked her out when she went to go check the mail. She wouldn't even acknowledge her son the entire month. He would ask for her and try going to her, but she would just push him away. There's a picture of her looking at him like she's going to kill him. This went on for the whole month. By the end of the month, I got my mom and son on an earlier flight back to my mother's house. Why did I let this go on for an entire month? Because I'd installed cameras all over, inside and out of my house to protect from another break-in. They ended up being used to build a case against his mother. I showed her the videos and the CPS papers my attorney was able to get, and she signed my son over to me with no issue. My family is honestly afraid that she will kill our son without realizing what she's doing. Story 50. When I found out she was effing one of the kids' judo instructors, after catching her sexting a year earlier, then hosting another martial artist at our house for a drink whom she was trying to F. She still wanted to have sex with me and wanted to live in the house. It quickly turned into random guys dropping her off in the morning, her leaving her vehicle God knows where. She would disappear for weeks at a time and ask me to leave the house when she showed up so she could spend time with the kids. She would insult me when I would go out and send threatening texts telling me to die or that I didn't care about the kids because I would come home after being gone for 2 hours. When I did come home, she would leave. She was physically abusive as well as mentally abusive. We were together for 10 years. She had been gang SA'd at some point when she was younger. We didn't have sex, but maybe once a month here and there as a result of her trauma. I had asked her to seek counseling for this issue here and there when we started dating, and she would either blow it off, start and stop, or say she could deal with it on her own, which she threw in my face years later, saying I never tried to help her. Years later, we started having sex a lot more frequently. I started noticing that it only seemed to happen when she was intoxicated. We would have sex at least 4 or 5 times a night. When I couldn't keep up at times, she would punish me psychologically and tell me I wasn't crap. She was happy when she got what she wanted. When she was angry, she was physically abusive and manipulative. I started seeing all this as time went on. She took more pictures of herself than she ever did the kids. She's hit me with a guitar, slapped me in the face in public, and I've been hit with lamps, remote controls, and had my face scratched up, all the while staying in it because of the kids. I had enough finally when she decided she needed to have a second phone so she could have privacy, as all my passwords and phone passwords were known. I had only become suspicious when she started changing her passwords in the very beginning. Story 51. Because she wanted a divorce because I did not want her to take 6 months off after getting her master's in clinical psychology. Because she wanted a divorce after I told her to apply to private gyms instead of 24-hour fitness when she decided to be a personal trainer after taking 6 months off. When she wanted a divorce after she complained I wasn't supporting her after everyone at 24-hour fitness didn't care she had a master's when they had a high school diploma yet did as well or better than her. That she wanted a divorce when I wasn't supportive when she quit being a personal trainer and became a receptionist at a car dealership. Then I wasn't supportive when no car salesman cared she had a master's in clinical psychology yet was able to be a receptionist. When she claimed I caused her to crash her car because she was crying so hard after I told her she needed to get a real job because $14 an hour wasn't worth it, and that she needed a divorce because I didn't understand her. When I realized she would counter with, I want a divorce any time I did something she didn't agree with. Don't want to go to the dog beach today? I want a divorce. Don't want to spend $800 on flying her parents out for the weekend? I want a divorce. I called her bluff and said okay. She put no effort into the relationship once we were married. She had this obsession that women need to be chased the entire time by men, so if I wasn't actively courting her and appeasing her, then I didn't deserve her. Also, she spouted this to everyone in a relationship she knew. When I asked her why she married me, she said that I was chasing her, but then it was like I gave up after we were married a year. It was more like we were spending $1,400 on rent, and she wanted to spend $800 a month on a psychologist, plus all our other expenses when I was still an undergrad and she wasn't working. One of her best friends from school was a stay-at-home mom who decided she wanted to go back to school for fun. She was a millionaire and bored, so she went to Rosemead at Beulah just for fun. Yet she was appalled by how much my ex wanted to spend and said she herself was spending $400 a month in Long Beach for the same number of sessions. She offered to have my ex go to the same psychologist and then they would get dinner or hang out after. But my ex didn't want to drive 30 minutes to Long Beach, so we continued paying $800 and then $1,200 because the stress was causing her to need more help. So I gave up. We moved back to Minnesota and she stayed at her parents' house. Then she moved to South Carolina and took our 3 dogs with her without telling me. Good news is that I found someone new and I'm expecting our second boy to pop out in 30 to 50 days. I still miss my little dogs though. Story 52. I'm late to the party, but a litany of reasons. Mainly she had an affair with a coworker, which, had she just admitted to it, maybe we could have worked through it. But for months she made me seem like I was crazy for suspecting something was up. I gave her space, tried talking to her, thought it was a postpartum phase thing. We had a 1-year-old and she was never the same after she was born. Nothing worked. Finally, I had to resort to snooping her text messages, which confirmed it all. Pictures and more I didn't need to see. It was finally open in the air, and I called her while she was at work and told her I knew, and her first response was, I just don't want to come home to all my clothes on the front yard, because that was what was important, not losing me or our daughter. We thought about counseling, but then I said she needs to change jobs and cut contact, and I got, that's not an option. Okay. She told her friends of her affair, but made it sound like a one-time thing. They called me over to talk to me. I brought our 1-year-old with, to get my side, which was so much worse. My ex got wind of it, and when I returned home, I sat my daughter on the couch next to her, and she exploded yelling at me. I immediately went to pick up my daughter and started heading to the garage, and she came at me and wildly swung for my face while I held our daughter. I caught her arm with my free hand, and my daughter screamed directly at her with angry eyes. I couldn't believe it. My ex froze, released her arm, and I left. Now she's married to the affair partner. All her friends are now my friends, and we have joint 50-50 custody. She's actually become a much better mom in the years since the divorce, and we've made every effort to put our daughter first. We even had a trip to Disney World together, separate rooms, so we could share in our daughter's first trip there. However, every now and then she reminds me of that horrible person that lurks inside her. She didn't tell me she was bringing my daughter around the other guy, nor did she even tell me they were getting married. Every now and then, she shows up to drop off pissed off about something, and I can't help but thank God I'm not on the other side of that crap show on a daily basis, like the other guy now is. My daughter is well-adjusted, funny, amazingly smart, and beautiful. I didn't want her to grow up without her mom, so I suffer through seeing my ex twice a week at drop-offs. Can't wait till my daughter can drive or autonomous cars arrive so I can never see my ex again. Or at the very least, much more infrequently. Story 53. She stole $20K from the family between charges to my credit card and cards she had in secret that she stuck me with after each of our 2 kids were born because she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, only to go back to work a month after I took loans against my 401k to support that desire. Snuck out of the bed in the middle of the night to sext/call 13 different men over the course of 3 months, including my best friend of 12 years. Did her best to alienate me from friends and family, encouraged me to treat myself to a selfish purchase, which I rarely, if ever, did, only to use it against me in arguments, set up a threesome when we first started dating with a friend of hers that I had zero clue about until it was damn near happening, then threatened to ruin my career by telling my workplace every time she didn't get her way, was emotionally, verbally, and physically abusive. But the last straw was when I discovered she cheated with a live-in nanny we'd hired so she could open up her availability at work to become a manager. I had a hunch she had cheated and asked her about it. She denied it and accused me of sabotaging the relationship. She texted him how much she enjoyed the sex when I was standing next to his phone, and I saw it flash across the screen. I had no more lines in the sand to draw. It's been 28 months since I left her. I found out from mutual friends there have been other men after the fact. I'm still legally separated as she's dragging the divorce out, but I have full physical custody of our kids, and every day is slightly better than the previous one. Story 55. She found a flat for our boys to move into, and said she would stay there a couple days to decorate. A couple days turned into 6 months, during which time I discovered she had been sleeping with my best friend. He was more like a brother, or so I thought. Left me with a house, 5 kids, and a job. Called me and asked if she could come home. I still loved her, so said yes. We argued for 2 weeks. She texted me when I was at work to say she was leaving again. I left work, went home, packed a small bag with a change of clothes, and walked out. We had a shared account that my wages went into. That was empty the next day, along with the savings account. She was never home, never paid the mortgage or utility bills. I went to see the kids one Wednesday, and the eldest said they had the bailiffs round and had to be out by the weekend. She hadn't been home for 2 weeks. I drove down to my now ex-friend's place, walked in and found them in bed watching the new TV that my money had bought, along with new fridge/freezer, washing machine, microwave, plus a number of other appliances. Told her I was taking the kids and that since the previous Thursday, everything to do with the house was in her name as I'd had my name removed. She had signed something to do with divorce papers. Turns out it was to do with the mortgage. I picked the kids up Friday afternoon and all they brought with them were a few personal belongings and a few clothes. I bought everything else from new with the help of my very understanding boss. This was all 18 or 19 years ago. Her and my ex-mate got married, but she's now moved in with her mom and he's moved on to a new model that has more money coming than her. They're in the beginnings of a nasty divorce. She's tried to make contact with me through Facebook and even sent me a message apologizing. No. The kids have no contact with her at all. As a footnote, a few weeks after I left her, I had a nervous breakdown. Always thought of myself as an emotionally strong man, but that time in my life literally nearly killed me. In my darkest days, I often considered self-unaliving. My brother saved my life a couple times. He didn't know it and never will, as we lost him to cancer a year and a half ago. I miss him more than I ever missed my ex.